I'd love it if we had journalists, politicians, people of influence listening to what we've got to say, and most importantly, hearing occupational therapists talk about it. I think I've said a lot of times that on the news, you'll see issues that are incredibly important to occupational therapy being talked about, but it won't be occupational therapists talking about them. And that needs to change.
Yeah.
We need to be the experts in what we're expert in. When those talking heads are there, it should be us sometimes. So let's do it. Let's make that happen.
Yeah. Be bold and be heard. You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Nink. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. Now, you know I love a good trailblazer, a good advocate, somebody who is a little bit rebellious in standing up to norms that don't fit. And Keir Harding is no disappointment. He's a mental health occupational therapist in the UK, and I was thrilled to have the opportunity to interview him for the Brave OT podcast. In this interview, we talk about his upcoming Elizabeth Casson Memorial Lecture. Keir specializes in working with individuals who are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And there's a lot of stigma around that diagnosis. We get into it. We get into the difficulties with the label, with the way people with this diagnosis are treated by other professionals, and really how to do better. Now, we're all invited to watch this online Elizabeth Casson Memorial Lecture called Nothing Grows in Toxic Environments. So we'll be sure to listen to details on how to access that lecture. I hope you enjoy Keir's passion and enthusiasm as he encourages you to be a little bit more brave as an OT. Keir, welcome to the Brave OT podcast. I'm really grateful you're here.
Thank you for having me, Carolyn. It's really nice to be invited.
I feel like I'm talking to a bit of a mental health OT rock star.
Dear, no, let's disavow everybody of that notion very quickly. Just because you say a lot of things doesn't infer any kind of expertise or anything. So yeah, just somebody who's a bit noisy, I think.
I can appreciate that. I've said that a few times as well to people where they say, oh, wow, something about projecting success on my loudness. And I say, oh, no, it's just that I've just gotten really loud online in the last couple of years. So you see me. It doesn't mean I'm doing anything better than anybody else. It's just a willingness to be a little bit brave to speak out about things we're passionate about.
And I've not always done it. I think if you were in university with me, you would, if you remembered me, you would remember a very, very shy young boy. I went straight from school, and I used to have really chronic social anxiety. So
Really?
if anyone spoke to me, I went bright red, I would sweat, I would avoid as much kind of interaction as I could. And it was only years and years later that I started to feel a bit more confident in putting my ideas out into the world.
What do you think drove that confidence?
I think doing some work in a particular area and then doing some study around that and really starting to get a sense of, I possibly know more about this subject than the average person in the street, started to feel a little bit more vocal about things. Probably coupled with being in some situations where I had really been quiet, and the consequences of that were quite bad, and I've regretted not being more vocal in those situations for a long time. So I think, the necessity to be more vocal is important, as well as having that sense of, not that what I say is like some kind of command from on high. It's it might carry a bit of weight.
Speaking about specialization and developing confidence makes me think of the contrast as well. When we graduate, we know a little about a lot of things. And our uniqueness as OTs is the way we look at things, I think, the way we approach things, the way we support people. And I think that having that variety is important too, but I see so many OTs not feeling confident. And so it is nice to specialize, and it's also nice to be a generalist. Thinking about OTs who are working in a variety of settings and less specialized, where do you think they might find a little bit more confidence?
I think you can be a specialist and being a generalist. There's not that many of us around. And certainly, if you needed your house adapted, I'm more likely to knock down your wall than fit a grip rail in a way that's going to be useful. So I would own that. You do your job and you see yourself making a difference to people's lives. And
Yep.
if you want people to have better lives, then we should probably be more vocal about that. I think one of the things that I've really found is like social media has definitely helped me find a voice for myself. It's kind of put ideas out in the world. And some people rip them apart, but enough people say, no, I agree with you. No, I like what you're saying. And I never really used to have that in the real world. So, yeah, getting a bit of an online community that kind of shared my values and ethos just helped me to articulate it a bit better, I think.
How would you describe your values as an OT?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. My values as a person or my values as an OT, which I wonder if they're different.
I would imagine they're like a Venn diagram that almost entirely overlaps.
Yeah. I find it really hard to see people suffering. It's something that's quite painful to me to see people in distress. Knowing that you can do something about that has been a big motivator for action for me. So there's probably that. What else? I don't like people wasting money. One of the things I'm very passionate about is the people I work with often get detained in hospital for years on end, having treatment that nobody's particularly optimistic will make any difference. So I'm quite passionate about working with people in the community where the evidence is, and it costs a fraction of the amount to do that.
It's a lose-lose situation when they're in the hospital because it costs the
Wow.
healthcare system and the individual.
Absolutely. What it does do is it takes people that practitioners are worried about and puts them somewhere else. So as an intervention for that practitioner or that team or that organisation, it works brilliantly. For the lives of that person and for the health economy in general, it's quite a poor option. So if we can alleviate suffering while saving money, then that's a good thing to do. And it's quite sad that you have to make the argument around money. The ethics of it doesn't really wash that well, but people who pay over £1 million to incarcerate 4 people for a year, we can do some very good community treatment with that money.
Absolutely.
But we won't be able to find that money while we're pouring it away in hospitals that call themselves specialists but with very little to back up.
Yeah. So if the only population group in that scenario that's benefiting from admitting individuals to the hospital, and I'm hesitating to even call it the diagnosis, the clinical diagnosis that you're specializing in is borderline personality disorder, but we don't like that term. And I'd love to get into talking about that a little bit more. But for those individuals who are put in hospital rather than supported in the community, you said that the ones who it benefits are the treatment providers who aren't feeling like they can do this. So is the answer better training for them?
Possibly. If I think about my training, I was never prepared to work with people who might hurt themselves or want to die. I wasn't prepared to work with people who would be incredibly distrusting of me or who might find me threatening. I can't help but acknowledge that I remind a lot of people I work with of people who have hurt them. And that's part of our relationship from the offset, which makes it hard. I think as staff, we come into work often wanting to help people alleviate suffering, and we do that, and we have a sense of being good and effective people. But when we don't get that reflected back to us, when people see us as threatening and potentially untrustworthy, it hurts. And sometimes we act that hurt out rather than being able to notice it and name it and choose how to respond to it. So yes, it is definitely about better training, but better training for the difficulties of the work rather than around a particular diagnosis, I think.
In my own experience working with mental health as a mental health OT, is that it's exactly that. It's a difficult emotional experience for me in working with these individuals. And I've often seen that as part of being a fairly sensitive individual. And my sensitivity is a superpower in a lot of places. But I feel like with this population, sometimes it can feed into not being a healthy situation. And I'm hearing a lot of sensitivity in the way you're talking about yourself and your reactions. And so please dispel any of these thoughts I have around me not being well equipped as an individual with my personality.
Well, I'll answer it in a slightly different way. I think a lot of the time when people say, "Oh, how do you work with borderline personality disorder?" People talk about boundaries, got to be firm, and that's not how we interact with humans. We don't go around our world with a preconceived idea of being especially rigid with our relationships with people. And if we're working in mental health, the only tool that we've got to work with people is the relationship that we have. So if we start off on the footing, this relationship is going to be dangerous to me in some way, I have to be on my guard. That's not us being the therapists that we train to be. That's not us being who we want. I find the best relationships I've ever had and the most therapeutic relationships that I've had is when I've been as genuine as possible with people, that nobody ever does something wrong because it's a boundary issue. Maybe they do something that impacts on you and you're able to share that and then work out what to do with it together, as opposed to being firm and rigid and telling people how it has to be. Equally, I think we have to listen to what people tell us. Given up on counting how many times I've heard that you can't believe people, you can't trust them. I just believe people. If that is your default, I don't really think you'll go wrong. But the idea that we're constantly being lied to or tricked or split.
Manipulated, yes.
Well, manipulated,
Yeah.
It just means that your relationship is toxic from the outset. If we can't form healthy therapeutic relationships with people, it doesn't really matter what else we want to do. People will sense us being disingenuous. People will sense us being cold and reserved. It's like I sometimes have students say, I want to develop my professional persona. And I was like, what does that mean? I want to be a little bit more cold and offish with people. Like, why would you want to do that?
Oh, that's sad. That's very sad. So speaking of environment, you have a lecture, very exciting thing coming up. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Elizabeth Casson Lecture?
Yeah, so I think the equivalent in America is the Siegel Lecture. I don't know if Canada's got an equivalent, but once a year, somebody gets nominated to give this prestigious lecture. So Elizabeth Casson was the person who founded the first school of occupational therapy in the UK. And yeah, once a year, somebody's asked to come talk on a topic of their choosing. And there's been a terrible error at the Royal College of Occupational Therapists because this year it's me that's doing it.
But your peers nominate you, right? Your peers conspire to put you in this place.
Sorry, two people nominated Alex Thorntop and Chrissy Wards put their names to a bit of paper saying they would like me to do it. And a panel of people thought, yes, that's the man for the job this time. And I'm very excited about it. I've probably been asked to do this because I've got a decent social media presence for an occupational therapist. And I want to try and use this opportunity to make this lecture the biggest it has ever been. I want the world seeing occupational therapists talking about important issues. I think it raises us as a profession. I think it raises the issues we care about to a wider community. So, yeah, I think there's probably the argument that I'm narcissistically trying to go on some massive self-promotion drive. But there's evidence as well to suggest that I'm really trying to do something that makes the profession louder and prouder than it has been before.
I've been watching you on social media for some time, and your passion and your mission are constant. and strong and clear. So I had no notions whatsoever about this being
Other
about you.
opinions are available, Carly.
Okay. And I think it's a tenacity, right? I was looking at one of the descriptions in your bio somewhere, and I'm wondering, was this Alice who wrote this? She said that it is clear from Keir Harding's CV that he is a luminary in our profession. It is no wonder that he's a popular speaker at the national conferences where he lights up the room with passion, tenacity, and vision. And I think it's that passion, tenacity, and vision that truly is selfless. It's about your mission. And I'm really excited that you're doing this. Having a great social media following is because of your passion. You want to be heard. You want people to do better.
And I think I do want to be heard, but I suppose it's about thinking that you're saying something important. And if you're saying something important, how limited do you want your audience to be? How few people do you want to hear that? It's not, you want to get to as many people as possible. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, trying to increase the environment that we influence.
Oh, that's great. So tell us a little bit more about what you have planned to share in the lecture.
Okay, so the theme is that nothing grows in toxic environments. If I was going to write the title again, I'd probably say nothing thrives in toxic environments. Don't grow in the most healthy ways. I want to think about how our relationships are really important, but there's so much that impacts on relationships. There's the stigma that we've been talking about, the labels that we give people. There's the pressures that we put on staff that make them afraid. We've talked about people being exported away to make the treating team feel better. I think that happens a lot, but not just that way of managing anxiety. I think there's a lot of ways that frightened staff managing anxiety in services, but they act it out without thinking because we just cannot acknowledge that staff are terrified of being blamed for things or being sued for things.
Yeah.
I think there's other things like a lack of resources that impact on our ability to do the jobs that we want. If we're working in large organizations, we might not have that much autonomy as a therapist. We might have quite strong controls over what therapy looks like, how long it goes on for, what tools are used, where it takes place. And that might be fine, but it might be very different from what we feel needs to happen as holistic and client-centered practitioners. I'm going to think about some of the dangers of sticking your head up and saying, I think there's something going wrong here. And then probably most of all, there's going to be a sense that as a society in the world, we look at the individual and we make everything about the individual. I work with people who are ill. I work with people who have an illness or disease. I don't work with people who have been affected by what's happened in their lives and the situations that they've lived through. The people I work with have seen them being ill. And that's an absolute nonsense. We have to think about the environment around people. We're occupational therapists. We have to think about the environment. If you lose your legs tomorrow, OTs will come in and think about the environment with you nonstop and everything will get adapted. And I think we need to adapt our social environments as well. Things in our social environments, both within work, but within wider society as well, that are toxic and really hurting the young people who are growing up today. Then we're going to finish with a kind of rallying cry of, geez, let's go do something about it.
The rally cry. That's very brave.
It's weird, like you get asked to do a lecture and somebody will say, Kia, can you come and talk about, and they'll give me a bit of a brief. Anything. I can talk about anything. So it's been interesting kind of like doing oat talks and asking on Facebook and Twitter. I've got this opportunity. What should I be talking about? And people have really helped shape what has gone into this. This is very different to what it would have been if I just sat in a room by myself and decided what to put down. And it's interesting seeing it evolving over time as well. I think as I get ideas and then I go out into the world and discuss them with people, it gets refined a bit. Bits have been chopped out, bits have been added. So I'm hoping, if I am a product of the community, because it is the world that's given me a bit of a social media following, it's the world that's put in a place to be able to do this. If I am a product of that, then this lecture is definitely a product of the people who I interact with.
And you will be shaping others in their listening. Now, this isn't open to just, it's free. It's not just for OTs in the UK. Anybody can attend this lecture.
Absolutely anybody can attend this lecture, yeah. So I would love it if occupational therapists can. I think you could submit your receipt of booking on as evidence of CPD. So there's some free CPD for people there. But I would love people to come. I would love people to bring colleagues with them. I would love people who receive our services to come along and hear what I think is important, but I think it's important because my peers think it's important as well. I'd love it if we had journalists, politicians, people of influence listening to what we've got to say, and most importantly, hearing occupational therapists talk about it. I think I've said a lot of times that on the news, you'll see issues that are incredibly important to occupational therapy being talked about, but it won't be occupational therapists talking about them. And that needs to change.
Yeah.
We need to be the experts in what we're expert in. When those talking heads are there, it should be us sometimes. So let's do it. Let's make that happen.
Yeah. Yep. Be bold and be heard. So the lecture itself is on April 27th, is it? 2023, in case people are hearing this later. But we will definitely get it out so people will hear this before that date. And I think it's 6:30 p.m. in the UK. Is that correct?
That sounds about right.
Sounds about right. We'll post the link in the show notes so that people can access that. And that way people can register and attend. And if people register and attend, do you know if there will be a recording that people would have access to if they happen to be working at that time?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Wonderful. That's really exciting. I love the words you're using. I love the spirit of the way you're talking and talking about people in the context of their environments that are not just physical, their occupations, the way people are interacting and doing things in their world. And you talk a lot about the dark side of occupation. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Oh, it's a concept that Rebecca Twinley came up with. But when I talk about it, I often get it wrong and she tells me off. So let's have a go. Okay. So it comes from the idea of the dark side of the moon, that this thing exists, but light is not shone upon it. And Rebecca had the idea that there were a range of things that people did that had value and meaning, but that didn't really get thought about in the occupational therapy context. So thinking about the people that I work with, occupational therapists would work with them and think about cooking and sleeping and going to college. They would think less about what kept people detained in hospital. They wouldn't put a lot of effort into thinking about, why does it make sense to cut my arms open? Why does it make sense to take 5 boxes of paracetamol? Because these are things that they do that are better than not doing them. But I think we always understood them in a moral way. It's a bad thing and you shouldn't do it. We will stop you. As opposed to, this is something that serves a purpose for you. Have a think about what that is. And I think probably one of the things that has really influenced me in my career is that if you stop doing the thing that people do to get relief, it's not like that pain goes away. They'll do something else. So if somebody cuts very carefully with the razor that they always use, if you take that away, they start ripping open coat shelves, they start smashing crockery, they start banging their head off the wall. So we get more restrictive and they do more and more dangerous things.
Which escalates from there.
It does, because the knee doesn't go, the itch doesn't go because you've taken the back scratch away, unless we can understand why people do the things that they do. Just taking away the tools to do it doesn't make any difference at all. And we become another person who has taken power away from someone.
Right. And that just adds to that sense of stigma and being misunderstood and nobody can help me. And why would I listen to any of you?
Yeah. And it's weird, the amount of people who I work with who've they've been detained for long periods of time. They've used self-injury for years and years and years. And they will say, no one's never asked me about this in this way. No one's ever tried to understand this way. And it's not something that's special about me, but it's baffling, I think, that we can only moralize about self-injury rather than trying to understand it.
And so the answer is not distraction. It's not just giving them a hobby or something. It's understanding the motive, I'm hearing. understanding the urge, the why, power, tell me what you ask. What are the questions you ask?
How does it help? Why is it useful? I'll probably frame it with the idea about might be really painful to talk about, and if it is, I want you to tell me. And if you want to stop, I want you to tell me that you want to stop, because I'm a total stranger, so this might be hard to talk about with me. But I want to understand this. I want to understand it because I think if we don't understand, people will make up their own ideas and they'll probably get it wrong. So if you can understand, we're far more likely to do something that's useful for you. And then from that, and this is probably a bit DBT really, dialectical behaviour therapy for people who are recurrently suicidal and using self-harm, designed by somebody who was recurrently suicidal and using self-harm. So
Marshall Linehan.
Marshall Linehan, yeah.
Yeah.
So it takes the idea of chain analysis. So kind of, about half an hour before you did it, what was going on? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? Just factor, right? Just what was going on at that point. And then I'll try and take people. And then what happened? So what did you think? What did you feel? Did you have an urge to do anything? What did you do? And then we'll take it step by step from that. So that we've gone from somebody was all right, certainly not hurting themselves, to somebody who did something dangerous. And we map out those different things. And then once we've got that map, we can start thinking, right, so this was the purpose, this might be useful. At this stage, this might have been more useful. At that point, the environmental response, when people came in and said, that's a terrible thing you've done, we've got to clean all that up now, that filled you with shame and made it more likely that you would do it again. Take that out into the environment then. Yeah. So sometimes I think just helping people get that understanding of why they did what they did is useful for them. It makes them feel a bit less mad. It makes sense. Makes sense how I got from there to there. It definitely helps staff groups who kind of just attention seeking. I've read in somebody's notes that they just did it because of their diagnosis. That's how limited we could be in our understanding of something. But yeah, if the staff group understand it differently, they keep a bit more empathy.
Yeah.
And then it makes sense. So if somebody cuts for a particular reason, you can think about that risk. But I think sometimes they've cut themselves. They could do anything. Let's not let them outside in case they jump in front of a car. Have they ever jumped in front of a car? They haven't, but you never know, do you? It's my registration on the line. You can't detain people for things that they've never done and never shown any inkling of doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it's really important the way you framed it before asking those questions, because I suppose they've been asked many times, why did you do that? And it's different in the context of, I'd really like to understand, and other people probably misunderstand or might misunderstand. So they feel inevitably misunderstood. But why did you do that can be a shaming question. And that's not how you framed it at all.
So I think the most useful thing I learned in all of my mental health training was to validate people. Yeah. I think the more validation you give somebody, the better relationship you have, the less othered and different they feel. And you just get the sense, or give people the sense that what they've done makes sense. It's not abnormal. It's not deranged. It's not psychotic. It makes sense what they're doing. So yeah, all of it's probably hard for you to talk about this. I think you've only done it because it was better than not doing it. And I just want to understand why that was.
And I'm thinking about the listeners who might not be working specifically in mental health settings, but they're encountering individuals who have the self-harming and suicidal tendencies and thoughts, actions. What are things that how might people who are more generalists or in other settings approach things in a way that is more validating and affirming?
Well, I think to try and consciously be validating is a useful thing. And I don't want to take you through all the different steps of validation unless you desperately want me to. Just very consciously giving people the message that the things that they feel, the urges that they have, the thoughts they have, they make sense. You might not agree with them, but it makes sense that they feel what they feel. Yeah. You might not validate the behavior somebody did, but you can validate the urge and the emotion behind it. Yeah. You might feel the same in those situations. And I think you are going to come across this population in all aspects of your work. Probably one of the things I really encourage people is to not be like cold and rigid and on your guard, but expect that the relationship's going to be difficult. If you were meeting somebody who's been repeatedly let down by people, repeatedly told that their thoughts and feelings are wrong, that perhaps they are less deserving than other people, that's going to impact on your relationship. And I think if you have that in mind, then you'll probably anticipate some of the difficulties a little bit more. When somebody leaves your appointment early, you might take it as a bit less of a slight and a bit more of something happened there, something was going on, I wonder what that was.
Curiosity.
Curiosity really helps.
Yeah.
But I think we are in systems that encourage us to plow through, and if somebody doesn't turn up for an appointment, that's almost as good as a cure. So yeah, keeping that curiosity, keeping that idea that it will make sense. And if it makes sense, then we can do something else.
Words matter, and borderline personality disorder is an awful term. And personality disorder, any type of personality disorder. Can you tell us a little bit about your perspective on these diagnoses?
Okay. So borderline personality disorder is a term in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual and the International Classification of Diseases. To win a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, you have to hit 5 out of 9 criteria, which I'm not going to rattle off. The more common ones are around self-harm.
Interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, moving between idealizing and denigrating, some kind of psychotic kind of paranoid experience. So there's these criteria. My constant experience is that diagnosis is not a careful examination of people's histories, a detailed interview where they are meticulously compared to this criteria. Generally, if you're a woman who self-harms, that's the diagnosis that you're getting. So you've got that in that it's very subjective. You've also got things like, if you get this diagnosis, 80% of people with this diagnosis have lived through trauma. So you're working with traumatized people. And one of the criteria is inappropriate feelings of anger. And it's very odd for professionals to be telling survivors of abuse that their feelings of anger are inappropriate.
Yes. Yes.
Very odd about that.
No.
And then we've got the idea that 9 criteria, let's say you've got criteria 1 to 5, let's say I've got criteria 5 to 9, that's us sat on the board together, we share one characteristic, we've got the same diagnosis, prognosis, with 2 incredibly disparate presentations. It's an absolute nonsense. It's a very shorthand way of describing problems, which I often think is an underhand insult for people. Aaron Beck, the kind of creator of cognitive behavior therapy, he talked about 2 therapists talking to each other, and the one said, I'm having trouble with my patient with personality disorder. The other one says, how do you know they've got personality disorder? And the first one says, because I'm having problems with them. And I think that's a lot of where this diagnosis comes from. It's more of a label of the relationship between the clinician and patient than it is about the problems that the person's experiencing. And I think it masks a lot of other problems like autism, ADHD, certainly PTSD and complex PTSD. I think they're all buried under the umbrella of personality disorder. It's a nonsense. I'd get rid of it. I would, in fact, I'm interviewing to try and be part of an expert reference group looking at alternatives to telling people and children that their personalities are disordered.
What do you think needs to change?
So in the world of occupational therapy in particular, I don't think we need to be governed by diagnosis. If we take MoHo as an example, we recognize that people need to act. They do things that they want to do, they need to do, that they have the skills to do, and the environment around them affects that. And we can assess all of that without having to put a label on some of these problems. Certainly when the label, like the borderline personality disorder, really gets in the way and comes with a bucket load of stigma that might not want to be there. So as OTs, we don't need to be using diagnosis. And I'm writing something at the moment that said, actually, we should be putting a lot of our effort into combating the stigma around the people who've got that diagnosis already. We can do that. I think in wider psychiatry and medicine, there is no therapy that only works if people are told that their personalities are disorders. So let's stop doing it. The stigma around this line group is embedded more in mental health staff than the general population. So why would we give people a label that means that our colleagues are going to treat them worse? And I hear people saying, oh, but in my clinic, I use it in that way. Yeah, fine, but you've got no control about what happens when they walk out the door, when they're in A&E being stitched up with anesthetic, when they're asking their GP for pain medication and they're going, oh, BPD, I know what you're after. You know, it carries a long shadow. So, yeah, I would ditch disordered personalities as a way of understanding people who've lived through horror. So a bit more about understandable reactions to appalling circumstances.
Understandable reactions. Yes, absolutely. I've noticed you tend to use a more descriptive, like when you do need to speak about the group of individuals you're passionate about supporting and switching things up, you tend to use descriptors rather than a diagnosis. Tell us a little bit more about how you do that.
Oh, see, I'm not entirely sure what you mean now. I'm very careful to say people diagnosed with or people labelled with.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
I saw it on your website. I think even just the first thing that came on your website, and I've seen it this similarly in your social media, but I saw it described as, I think it was self-harm and suicidal. Suicidal. I don't remember what the word that came after that was actually, but it was more descriptive of a couple key factors that help to identify the experiences of the individual you're supporting.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm very keen to kind of say I don't only work with people who have a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. I work with people who are recurrently suicidal and self-harming as a way of coping, who often have difficulties in relationships. Now, 99% of those people get a diagnosis of personality disorder. Like I said, the label gets in the way.
Yeah.
So it's those problems I'm interested in helping people unpick and get them unstuck.
And there's a lot of compassion in the way you've described that. You described it as in that descriptor, there was a way of coping. It wasn't you're self-harming, and therefore we all know self-harming is bad. It was they're using these things as a way of coping. And that very subtle shift in the words is important.
Yeah. They only do it as better than not doing it.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
So you do not work for the NHS at this time. You have a company called Beam.
Yeah, I had a couple of different experiences in the National Health Service. One was working in a team that just wouldn't send people to hospitals that claimed to be specialist hundreds of miles away. They saw it as a place that wouldn't provide evidence-based care and that you could help people better in the community. And that's largely what the research says as well. So they wouldn't do that. I went somewhere else where almost the first line intervention was to send somebody to a hospital that claimed to be a specialist. And it was really hard seeing traumatized young women. It was generally traumatized young women who I know if they'd lived in another part of the country, they'd have got therapy in the community, but instead they were packed up and sent to places where nobody really had any optimism that things would get better. And we just kept seeing people coming back years later, very similar problems on an incredible cocktail of medication and generally 50% heavier than when they left. So that was really hard. And yeah, that's what kind of prompted me to kind of think, I know this can be done better. That's where setting Beam up came about. I suppose one of the great things about working for yourself is that you can choose how to work for yourself. So I often found that it was really hard to use lived experience within the NHS. People didn't want to pay lived experience practitioners or people who could articulate their experience of receiving services in any way that kind of matched the skills that they have. So in Beam, I work really closely with my colleague Holly, who's got lived experience. And like I said, I'm frightening to a lot of people. I represent people who've hurt people. When Holly's doing assessments and sessions with me, she's able to say, that thing that you feel, I felt that as well. I know what it's like to be locked in places like that. And it gives you a relationship that you just can't build in other settings. Yeah, it's one of the things about being is I'm able to engineer the social environment in that relationship to give it the best chance of feeling comfortable.
Hmm. And so you're working with individual clients. You're also doing training and advocacy. Tell us a little bit more about the variety of things that happen at Beep.
Okay, our mainstay is working with people who would otherwise go to hospital. So we provide some intensive therapy for people in the community while also helping the people who work with them to feel confident and competent in what they're doing, often trying to take some of the anxiety away and at least have people feel that they're doing what the client wants and practicing in a way that is ethical and in line with recommendations. I think when people get frightened, they want to be a bit more restrictive, so we try and help people not do that. With training, we try and help people work more effectively with this client group. We start off by really attacking the idea of disordered personalities, and we look at the stigma around people. We look at the dangerous things people do and why that makes sense. And we find that we can't really do other training until people have got that foundation to build on. A lot of times people ask us how to manage the PDs, and we can't do that. We can't validate their sense of wanting to be punitive and exclude a particular group. So once we get people thinking in that way, we can start helping people to be more effective, give them a few tips and tips, big emphasis on validation, and then we try and get people thinking about how to stay effective in the work that they're doing. It's really difficult. It's really difficult to be worrying about people dying a lot. So as staff, we need to be compassionate to ourselves and be able to kind of lean on our peers and recognise when things are getting tough for us. So we do a lot of training around that. I do a bit of tribunal work as well. So in the UK, you can be detained in hospital against your will, initially for a month, and then after that for 6 months, and then it gets renewed after that. And you have the opportunity to say, I don't want to be detained anymore. And then you can have some legal representation, and they might bring in some independent experts to argue why it is more useful for you to be out of hospital. And I've done that a couple of times. It's something that I find very rewarding. It's not particularly financially rewarding, but it's good to go in and really articulate generally how a change in the environment around someone has resulted in them being more dangerous. And the argument is often, well, they need to stay in this dangerous environment until they're safe. And I'm saying, let's take them out of the environment where they're most dangerous themselves and help them stay in the environment where they were safer and do more to preserve their own safety.
So, Keir, before I ask you the last questions that I ask everybody on the podcast, how do you want people to take action? Do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to share? Any ways you would like to empower OTs to take action from this point?
Good question, Caroline. I think as a profession, we're generally quite quiet. That's fine if we want to be overlooked and have other people talking about things that we are experts on. Now, if we don't want that, then we certainly need to up our research base. I'm not a researcher myself, so I recognise that's me telling people who are passionate about that to keep doing that. Unless we've got our RCT studies, we're always going to be overlooked to other professionals. But we do a lot of good work. And we do a lot of good work in a variety of areas that people don't know about. So I would encourage people to share the things that you're doing. Tell the world about the good work that you've done. When your patients are telling you that you've changed their lives, ask if they're happy to share it. Ask if there's ways that we communicate it. Write your journal articles, write your case studies, get on social media, tell people the things that you're doing. Tell your local journalists what you're doing. If there's a health policy that's being talked about on the news, write into your paper and give them an OT's perspective on that. Try and be that next talking head on the news story because it's a subject that we know a lot about. And let's just get into those areas that until now haven't been available to us because we can. And we can do what we do. So let's be the ones talking about it.
observed on social media there's an easy tendency to speak to the other OTs and not outward to the non-OTs who need to understand us. Have you seen the same?
I tell you what, it's like, I see a lot of people saying, oh, people still don't understand what I do. And it's like, what are we going to do about that? It's not. We do have professional bodies that we ask to speak on our behalf, but let's tell them what we want them to be doing. Let's make sure that the people in our circle know what we do. Let's make sure that we take the opportunities we can to talk to a wider audience so that people know what we do. If the public doesn't understand us, that's not the public's fault. So what will we do about that? If we're not waiting for somebody else to do it, what will we do?
Brilliant. What does being brave mean to you?
Oh, that's a good question. And one that I was utterly unprepared for. I think to be brave, you've got to do something that you're frightened of.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people tell me that I do brave things. A lot of the things I do now that people are scared of, I quite enjoy them. I think the bravest thing that I've done is when I've known the consequences would be awful, but it was the right thing to do, so I did it. That's what it means for me. For other people, I think it is trying to overcome those real feelings not to, but having that sense that this is the thing that needs to be done and doing it.
I think, fear is a prerequisite for bravery. Like if there's no fear, it's not brave. Yeah.
It's just doing a thing that other people wouldn't do.
Yeah. But I think people think that to be brave is to be fearless. And the opposite is true.
Yeah. Well, the more afraid you are, the braver you need to be able to overcome it.
And what is something brave you've done recently?
In terms of being over the top of a trench in a battlefield, this isn't that brave. But I talk about this in OT News' most recent episode. It's like I grew up in an environment where if you attempted to do something and you didn't succeed, you were mocked for it. And if you tried to do it in your own way, again, you'd be teased and humiliated. And what I learned from that is it is better to be seen not to try at something than it is to try and fail.
Stay in your lane. Don't deviate. Yeah.
Don't give somebody the chance to go, oh, yeah, he messed up. He didn't get what he wanted. And I'm really trying to do the opposite at the moment. So I'm walking around telling people I want this event to be the biggest it's ever been. I'm telling people that I want the attendance to be higher than ever before. And one of the closing things in that OT News article is getting this occupational therapy lecture talked about on the BBC. Is that too ambitious? Let's find out. And we will find out. But it's given me the opportunity for people to be able to say, no, he failed at that. For most of my life, I'd have just been really quiet and not risked being able to fail publicly. So I recognize that I'm getting into my area of discomfort by saying, I am trying to do something.
That's a great answer. How would you like to see OTs get a little bit more brave in the coming years?
So the OTs have got to be brave, and there's got to be stuff that OTs holding back from because of fear. Let's go to one of my default things then. My day-to-day work is helping people understand the function of self-harm and suicidality.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of occupational therapists doing that. I think we look at quality of life and activities of daily living. We don't look as closely on the things that might kill people and the things that might keep people detained in hospital or detained in prison. I think there's loads of opportunities for OTs to be articulate and expert on topics like violence, suicide, self-harm. And at the moment, we're not there, but we can be. I'd love to see us step into those environments. I'd love to see when we're doing ward rounds in the hospital, the OT's not just talking about whether somebody can cook, but also about their motivations for potentially lethal self-injury. I'd like OTs on the parole boards talking about the risk of somebody using violence again in the community, because we've got a good understanding of why violence was part of their life before they came into prison. Those are areas that we could talk about because we are the experts in what people do. We just need to claim that expertise and not give it to other professions.
We're going to share the link to the Elizabeth Casson Lecture, Memorial Lecture, But if people would like to contact you directly, how should they reach you?
Well, you talked about my incessant social media use, so it's more about how well people avoid me. I'm very easy to Google because I've got a fairly unusual name. I'm quite active on Twitter in particular. You can find Keir Harding MT on Facebook. If you want to email me, it's Keir, which is Keir. If you spell it wrong, I'll never get it. So Keir at beamconsultancy.co.uk. Beam like a beam of light. And like I say, if you Google me, you'll find all of the different social media ways of getting in contact. And I quite like people getting in contact. I like getting the messages. I'm very disorganized, so I might not reply very quickly. But if you want to talk to me, be a bit incessant, and I will get back to you, and I will look forward to hearing from you.
Well, I wish you a lot of luck isn't the right word. I really wish you well in this lecture. I think it's going to be really impactful. I'm going to be watching for sure. And I really appreciate you coming here.
I really appreciate you inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk to more people about it. So thank you, Caroline. I'm very jealous of your log cabin. I wish I was in one.
It is quite nice. In fact, this is my brother's cabin. He rents it out, and sometimes when it's empty, I come and work from here. I'm very grateful for that. This change of environment, it does wonders for my spirit and my creativity and my energy. It's a recharge place for me.
All occupational therapists should live and work in dual cabins.
I think so.
Right. It is an absolute pleasure meeting you and talking through stuff. So thank you so much.
Now, make sure you head over to the RCOT website to book your free ticket for the Elizabeth Casson Lecture. Here, we'll be talking about how nothing grows in toxic environments. I think you're going to love it. It's happening on Thursday, April 27th at 6:30 p.m. UK time. And you will also get access to a recording if you register. If you like talking about mental health and occupational therapy and looking after your own mental health, please reach out to me anytime. I am an OT who supports other OTs so they can thrive without the hustle. You're welcome to get started with my burnout ebook if you visit activatevitality.online/burnout mini book. You can download that ebook and start learning a little bit more about how to take care of your own mental health as an occupational therapist. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, be brave, OTs.